أشراف مطلوب وطالبه لله أكرام من يمشي على قدم. العلم نور مبين يستضيء به أهل السعادات والجهال في الظلم.
المفتي والمستفتي. When we started the book Usul al-Fiqh, we said that it consists of 3 pillars. What are those 3 pillars? Adillatul Fiqh al-Ijmaliyah, the evidences of fiqh in general. Ijmaliyah, meaning the Quran, the Sunnah, Ijma', Qiyas, Qawl al-Sahabi, and so on. What else? وَكَيْفِيَةُ الْإِسْتِفَادَةِ مِنْهَا. How do we benefit from these evidences? And that is to do with Am, Khas, Am Mahfud, Ghayr Mahfud, Mutlaq, Muqayyad, Nahyi, Amr, and so on. How do we benefit from the Quran and the Sunnah? The third was what? Halul Mustafid, ay al-Mujtahid, the hal, the scenario of the Mujtahid, and the conditions of the Mujtahid. And this is where this chapter is. So now we've reached the final hurdle, which is al-Mufti wal-Mustafti wal-Mujtahid wal-Taqleed wal-Ijtihad. And this is not specifically part of Usul al-Fiqh, or it's not part of the core part of Usul al-Fiqh, lakin it's from the Mukammilat, it's from those things that complete it or complement it. The Shaykh says, rahimahullah, wal-Mufti wal-Mustafti. Wal-Mufti huwa mada? Al-Mufti is the one that is هو المخبر عن حكم شرعي لمن سأل عنه. الإخبار, to inform. والمخبر عن حكم شرعي, he is the Mufti. So he is المفتي, he is the مخبر عن حكم شرعي لمن سأل عنه. لمن سأل عنه. So the Mufti is the one that is informing the person that asks him about the hukum shari'i, the legislative ruling. Halal, haram, wajib, mustahab. That is the Mufti. والمستفتي هو السائل عن حكم شرعي. The Mustafti is السائل عن حكم شرعي. The Mustafti is the one who is asking about a ruling of the Sharia. What do we have here? The Mufti and the Mustafti. And we have obviously what? Al-Ifta. Write that down. Al-Ifta. Al-Ifta or Al-Fatwa. Al-Fatwa is Al-Ikhbaru. الإخبار عن حكم شرعي لمن سأل عنه. الإخبار عن حكم شرعي, to inform of a legislative ruling. لمن سأل عنه, to inform the one that asks about it. As for the hukum of al-ifta, it can take all of the 5 rulings. مثلا, it can become wajib when the person is ahl al-fatwa, he can give a fatwa, he has knowledge and there's no one else to do it. It becomes mustahab when there are others to do the role of ifta, to give a fatwa. Like for him to do it, it is what? Mustahab. When does it become haram? If he has no knowledge. طيب. When there's no benefit, it can be said. When there is no benefit. When there is darar, it can become haram. When there is darar, it can become haram. And we shall see some of the etiquettes, as he shall see, rahimahullah. طيب. Lakin, when given a ruling or a hukum shari'i, it is very important that the Muslim is careful. There are many evidences that make it haram to talk about the Sharia in that which a person doesn't have knowledge of. قال جل وعلا ولا تقف ما ليس لك به علم إن السمع والبصر والفؤاد كل أولئك كان عنه مسؤولا. That is a prohibition from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in talking about things that we have no knowledge over. And a person will be questioned about that. Also Allah Jalla wa Ala says وَلَا تَقُولُوا لِمَا تَصِفُ أَلْسِنَتُكُمُ الْكَذِبَ هَذَا حَلَالٌ وَهَذَا حَرَامٌ لِتَفْتَرُوا عَلَى اللَّهِ الْكَذِبَ. And do not say that if you do not have any knowledge, do not say that that is halal or haram. It may be that you lie upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Also the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said in the long hadith, Abdillah ibn Amr ibn As, he said, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَقْبِضُ الْعِلْمَ انْتِزَاعًا يَنْتَزِعُ مِنْ قُلُوبِ الرِّجَالِ. صح? Towards the end of the hadith, he says, اتخذ الناس رؤوسا جهالة فأفتوا بغير علم فسئلوا وضلوا وأضلوا فضلوا وأضلوا فسئلوا, they were asked. So they had no knowledge, lakin they answered and they gave the answers without having any knowledge. فسئلوا فأفتوا بغير علم فضلوا وأضلوا. So that is, these evidences show that it is extremely dangerous when given a fatwa, because that is a tawqi' an Rabbil Alameen. It is as if you're saying this is the ruling of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is the ruling of the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And a person should run from giving a fatwa or giving an answer to a question as much as they can. They should run and avoid giving an answer to any question as much as they can. Why do you want to take the responsibility of other people's ibadat or other people's dealings? The next mas'ala that you need to find is, what is the difference between al-ifta' or al-fatwa wal-qada'? Al-fatwa wal-qada'. Al-fatwa wal-qada'. Where did we study this? Fiqh where? باب القضاء. No, باب القضاء. قضاء. لا. Where did we study the difference between fatwa and qada? In fiqh, manhaj salikin, towards al-qada. Huh? Say that again. Where? جنايات. نعم جنايات قضاء. The qada. نعم مفتي and qada. That time we were on the side of the what? On the side of the qadi. Now we're on the side of the mufti. Now we are on the side of the mufti. Who can remember those differences?
Qadi is more to do with specific personal matters, whereas the mufti is to do with general questions. So he tries to avoid giving, like, for example,
No, don't dig yourself a deeper hole. But I get what you're saying, like in the way you mentioned it, or the ta'bir.
the Qadi's ruling has to be taken, but the Mufti is ruling the
Naam, that is one of the differences. The Qadi's hukum, there's ilzam in it. It is binding. The Mufti, his hukum is not binding. What else? Say it again. The Mufti can change his answer. Okay, in a way, yeah, the Mufti can change his answer. Lakin the Qadi, in terms of a hukum that he gave previously, he doesn't need to go back to those people and say, listen, I've changed my madhab on this mas'ala. طيب, Sulaiman. Ahsant. The Qadi cannot deal with his usul and furu' and family members, because there's a tuhma there. He may give the ruling for them on their for their benefit. Lakin with the fatwa, your father comes to you, your children come to you, your so-and-so wife comes to you, you can give them, rather you should give them the answer to the question that they have. Ahsant. Jayid. The Qadi, you can do naqlul fatwa, la naqlul qada. Naqlul fatwa, مثلا, someone says to you, what is the hukum of, مثلا, shortening your prayers when you get to Gatwick Airport? You give someone a fatwa. That someone that you give a fatwa, he can tell it to the other 10 people that he's traveling with. And so Sheikh Fulan said that we can shorten our prayer in Gatwick Airport. However, with qada, let's say you go to court and you had a dispute with your missus over custody of the children, wal-'iyadhu billah, and then he gave you a hukum. He said, listen, you're entitled to the children for 5 days of the week. And she's entitled to the children, how many days a week? 2 days a week. You cannot go to your friend who's also going through custodial issues with his wife and say, listen, خلاص عندي علم يقين. You can't say, listen, خلاص, the ruling is that you get her children for 5 days and the other person, the wife or your ex, gets custody of the children for 2 days. You can't do that. Why? Because qada is qadiyatu ayn. It's specific to a person. It's specific to that mas'ala. Like with the fatwa, it is general. Is that understood? Right. Also, the mufti, he looks at what? Another difference. He looks at the kitab and the sunnah. He looks at evidences from the kitab and the sunnah. As for the qadi, he looks at evidences that Muhammad and Ali give to him. The evidences of the khusum. Or al-mutakhasiman. Those people that argue or have the mas'ala about them or the khilaf between them, he looks into their evidence. Their evidence could be anything. Even receipts can be evidence for the qadi. Sah? مثلا, they argue over a phone. A brand new phone. And one of them shows a receipt. They argue over that phone. One of them shows the receipt that he bought that phone with. And the other says, I don't have a receipt. Who takes the phone? طبعا, the one that has evidence. So the mufti's evidence is the Quran and the Sunnah. The evidence of the what? The qadi is not specific to the Quran and the Sunnah. It's specific to, it goes around, or it is to do with the evidences of the people that are disputing with him. طيب.
You add that the qadi must have certain traits, whereas the mufti is not sure to have certain personality traits.
Like we shall see, like in those traits that are in the qadi, they should also be in the mufti. مثلا لا يقضي القاضي وهو غضبان. The qadi should not give a hukum when he's angry. Does that mean the person could give a fatwa when he's angry? لا. So in most cases, in the sifat, they're the same. Other than obviously, for example, for the qadi, we said that when he's in the mahkamah, that people should be in front of him. صح? With the fatwa, they don't have to be in front of him. So مثلا, he says, listen, I said to my wife, أنت طالق, and I was extremely angry, this. He can give a hukum. He can give a hukum. صح? He can give a fatwa. He doesn't need to say, bring your wife, so I know that you actually did say that. So there's a bit, they may differ in a few things. طيب. Then the Shaykh says, rahimahullah ta'ala, شروط الفتوى, the conditions of the fatwa. Like in this part and the next part, he's going to talk about two things. Conditions for the fatwa of giving a fatwa. Meaning if you don't fulfill these conditions, then you can't give a fatwa. He's going to talk about little later on. He's going to talk about that type of little later on. Now he's going to talk about the fatawa that are jawaz, that make it permissible for you to do so. But they're not a condition for it. He says, يشتغل لجواز شروط الوجوب. نعم. يشتغل لجواز الفتوى شروط منها. There are conditions that have to be met for the person to be able to give a fatwa. The first is أن يكون المفتي عارفا بالحكم يقينا أو ظنا راجحا وإلا وجب عليه توقف. When a person is given the fatwa, he has to know the hukum. طبعا, if he doesn't know the hukum, he says Allahu A'lam. And there's no aib in saying Allahu A'lam. A man came to Imam Malik and asked him about 40 questions. And he said Allahu A'lam to about 35 or 36 questions. And the man said to him, I've come from Khurasan, what shall I tell the people? He said, قُلْ أَنَّ مَالِكًا لَا يَعْرِفُ. Tell him that Malik does not know. That is not an aib. Rather, it actually increases, the scholars say, it increases people's confidence in you. Because when you say, Allahu A'lam, La Adri, to a mas'ala that you don't know, later on they'll know, they'll put two and two together and they'll think Shaykh Fulan only answers that which he knows. Sah? Like if you, every time you say halal, 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 haram, 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 halal, halal, they'll think, he'll always give you a fatwa. So they'll have more confidence in you and in your knowledge if you say Allahu A'lam, because they'll know that you only say or you only talk about or give an answer to that which you know. Where the Shaykh says yaqinan, in that which you are certain of. Certain of, مثلا, how many times a day do we pray? Yaqini. Sah. Is it permissible to wipe over the socks? Yaqini. طيب. That is yaqeen. As for dhannu rajih, for example, dhannu rajih is that which is, there's a possibility elsewhere, lakin the stronger possibility is that this is the stronger opinion. Mathalan, camel's meat, does it nullify wudu? Is that yaqini? When you as a Hanbali say, yes, it does nullify wudu, is that hukm yaqini? La, it's not yaqini. Lakin dhannu rajih binisbati lak is the stronger opinion that you believe is the stronger opinion due to the evidences. طيب, so if you don't know that, if you don't know the hukm, وجب عليه التوقف, then it is wajib to refrain from giving an answer. The second condition is أن يتصور السؤال تصورا تاما. He has to be able to picture the question. He has to know the suratul mas'ala. So every time you hear suratul mas'ala, it is so that you know what the mas'ala that is being talked about is. Is that understood? And you can use that as a benefit when you're teaching. When you're teaching students, know that they understand what you're talking about first. Before even talking about khilaf. اختلف العلماء على كذا وكذا وكذا والدليل كذا وكذا وكذا. Before you even go into the mas'ala, they might not even know what on earth you're talking about. So make sure that they know the suratul mas'ala first. Likewise, the same here, same for fatwa. You have to make sure that you know the mas'ala at hand. لِيَتَمَكَّنَ مِنَ الْحُكْمِ عَلَيْهِ, so that you're able to give a ruling. If you don't know the ruling, then what? It's impossible. If you don't know the mas'ala, it's impossible for you to give a fatwa. صح? طيب. فإن الحكم على شيء فرع عن تصوره. Because when you're given a hukm on something, it is an offshoot of actually understanding the thing. It is an offshoot of understanding the actual mas'ala at hand. And also you have to you have to let the questioner finish his question. Lakin if he says, مثلا, he asks you a question and he says to you, Ya Shaykh, Hafizakallah, what is the hukum on wiping over the socks for the traveller? You say permissible. Sah? You've rushed him now. You haven't allowed him to finish the question. He could possibly say something else, right? What has he said to you? Ya Shaykh, what is the ruling on wiping over the socks for the traveller? And you stop him and say, La, Jais, 3 days you're allowed. What could he possibly say? Okay, he could say after 3 days. Or if he needs a ghusl. Sah. He might say, he might have meant, what is the ruling on wiping over the socks for the traveller after 3 days? No, not after 3 days. You said after 3 days. If he needs a ghusl. But you answered the question before he even finished it. Sah? So allow the questioner to finish his question first. Then the Shaykh says, Rahimahullah, فَإِنْ أَشْكَلَ عَلَيْهِ مَعْنَى الْمُسْتَفْتِي سَأَلَهُ عَنْهُ. If you have an ishkal and you don't quite understand what the person that is asking the question is saying, then what should you do? سَأَلَ عَنْهُ, you ask him, do you mean this? Do you mean that? وَإِنْ كَانَ يَحْتَاجُ إِلَى تَفْصِيلٍ اسْتَفْصَلَهُ. And if he needs more clarification, he asks for more clarification. أو ذكر التفصيل في الجواب. Or the questioner doesn't specify what he meant. Lakin, you ask him. You say, if this is the mas'ala, then it is this. If the questioner is talking about this, then this. If you're talking about this, then it is that. So you've done tafsil. Rather than waiting for him to give you a tafsil. He's giving you a general question, and you've said, okay, if it is this, then it is this. If it is that, then it is that. Is that understood? Right. Then the Shaykh says, Rahimahullah, he's going to give an example now. He says, فَإِذَا سُئِلَ عَنِ امْرِئٍ هَلَكَ عَنْ بِنْتٍ وَأَخٍ وَعَمٍ. Don't look at the book, look at me. I want someone to do this mas'ala from the sisters. A person dies leaving behind a bint, a daughter, and a brother, and a am. And a am shaqiq, his dad's full brother. What is the mirath for every person here? Sisters, bint, the akh, and the am shaqiq. The bint gets what? Nisf, excellent. The akh, he takes the baqi. And what about the am shaqiq? Doesn't get anything. طيب, hold on to that. Anyone else? So the sisters fell into the trap. So they would have given a wrong fatwa, صح? Like, you have to ask first. The bint, we understand what a bint is. Like in the akh, it could be akh li akh shaqiq, or akh li ab. Did we not study 3? طيب. And the am shaqiq, it says. The hukum, does it not differ? If it was, let's say, bint, akh shaqiq, am shaqiq. The bint gets what, sisters? The same. What does the bint get here? We have a bint, akh shaqiq, and am. What does the bint get? Nisf. Akh shaqiq, baqi. Am, I know nothing. Mahjub. I want you to use the mustalahat that you learn. Mahjub. طيب. Again, bint, akh li bint, sisters, bint, akh li am shaqiq. Bint gets nis. Akh li gets sudus. Am gets baqi. صح؟ باطل. هداكم الله. وشد فيه وشد أخ لأم فرع وارث. أخ لأم محجوب صح؟ لا, I think we need to leave sort of do مراجعة وفرائد. أخ لأم, is he not the mother, your brother from your mother's side, not mahjub by the daughter? إلا is mahjub. So the mas'ala should be bint nisf. والباقي لعم شقيق. He's the asaba. صح? So anyway, that is the example that the Shaykh rahimahullah mentioned. So the whole point of that is that you don't give an answer straight away unless you know the mas'ala that is being discussed. Unless you know the suratul mas'ala. Then the Shaykh says rahimahullah, all of you were nodding as well. أن يكون هادئ البال ليتمكن من تصور المسألة وتطبيقها على الأدلة الشرعية فلا يفضي حال انشغال فكره بغضب أو هم أو ملل أو غيرها. The Shaykh says rahimahullah, when the mufti is given a fatwa, he has to be in a state of tranquility. He has to be calm. He can't, for example, be extremely angry, can't be extremely happy, he can't be hungry, he shouldn't need to go to the bathroom, he doesn't, in a state that he doesn't need to go to the bathroom. Why is that? Because these things will prevent him from where? From what? Giving the correct answer. Also, when a person is extremely sad, you can't ask him for a fatwa at that particular time. صح? طيب. Also, certain situations, certain scenarios. So they say, مثلا Shaykh Muhammad Ibrahim and Shaykh rahimahullah, they said he used to have 2 families. One of the teachers at the Jami'ah said he used to have 2 wives. One, Zawjatul Ula, and the second obviously was Zawja Athaniya, صح? And obviously she was young and so on, so on. So on the day that he'd be teaching, if he was to come from the house of the first wife, the sharh, he would give a lot of sharh, mashallah. Like when he would be going to when he would come from the second house, Some يشرح خلاص حسبك. He would the sharh wouldn't be as long as it would be. Nah. And another sheikh, I remember a questioner called him at 1 a.m. in the morning. And he had a go at the question, and it was a woman. He had a go at her and said, what did he say? Do you think this is a shop or something, or 24-hour shop or something like that? So words along those lines. Right. So the questioner has to also take into consideration the hal of the one that he's asking. Then the Shaykh says, rahimahullah, ويشترط لوجوب الفتوى شروط منها. شروط منها. So these conditions are for it to be wajib upon the person. So it doesn't the previous conditions were when it becomes permissible. صح? Like in here is when it becomes wajib upon the mufti as an individual. طيب. الشيخ says رحمه وقوع الحادثة المسؤول عنها فإن لم تكن واقعة لم تجب الفتوى لعدم الضرورة إلا أن يكون قصد السائل التعلم فإنه لا يجوز كتم العلم بل يجب عنه متى سئل بكل حال. نعم. The Shaykh says رحمه الله, for it to be wajib, for fatwa to be wajib upon the mufti, the haditha, what is being asked, has to have happened. That's when it becomes wajib upon him. If it hasn't happened, does it become wajib upon him? No, it doesn't. فإن لم تكن واقعة, if it doesn't actually take place, لم تجب الفتوى. The fatwa is not wajib upon him. But why? لعدم الضرورة, because the need is not there. There's no dire need for this question to be answered. Unless obviously the person is asking by way of knowledge. By way of knowledge. Why? Because it is not permissible to hide knowledge, the Shaykh says. لا يجوز كتمان العلم or كتم العلم. So مثلا الآن now we're in class and you say, what is the difference between nas and zahir? And I say, listen, it hasn't even occurred yet, khalas. We're not going to answer it. I can't answer it. Is that permissible? Naam, why? What hasn't occurred yet? What mas'ala? There is no mas'ala. So it's permissible. It's permissible. I can't say to you, wait until it happens to you. We're now studying in class. So this is majal ta'aleem. Majal ta'aleem, when you're learning, is different. That's what, imagine you go into a test and the sheikh says to you, مثلا I write to you the exam, مثلا there's an exam, and I say to you, هلك عن بنت وأخ وابن. And you say, Allahu A'lam, Ustad, it hasn't even happened yet, so we're not going to answer it. Is that possible? You're getting a big cross, صح? خطأ. طيب. The second condition is ألا يعلم من حالي أو ألا يعلم من حالي السائل أن قصده التعنت. That if a person knows that the question is only doing it to waste time, just out of stubbornness, then it is not wajib for the person to answer. أو تتبع رخصي, or he is only doing so in order to look for concessions. So he looks at every madhab and he takes which is the easy opinion in every single madhab. And that has no ending. Or ضرب آراء العلماء بعضها ببعض. Or he's asking you so that he can say to you, لا, but Imam Ahmed said this when you give an answer. But Imam said this. Or Sheikh Fulan said this, but Sheikh Fulan said this. So that sort of person, there's no point answering his question. That sort of person, there's no point asking his question. Because if a person is looking for concessions, then you can't obviously possibly give him the right answer, because he's always going to want an easy answer. And on the opposite side, there are those muftis that always try to make things easier for the person at the expense of the sharia. Like recently, there was a sheikh that I listened to, a fatwa that was going around of his, and he said that me and the scholars of Europe, we've come together and we've come to the conclusion that it's permissible for children to celebrate birthdays. Why? Because if we don't let them celebrate birthdays, they'll feel left out and they'll feel lonely. Because they'll see that all of their friends are celebrating their birthdays. And that individual is a sheikh in the community. And he comes on the TV show and everyone asks him questions. Like, and he's become a laughing stock. Why? Because his questions, his answers are always silly answers a lot of the times. So people actually ask him questions when they want fun. Is that understood? Many of you probably, in the Somali community, someone that is well known. But for him to say, listen, I've looked at the masalih and the mafasid and the sharia, and now I've come to the conclusion that it's permissible to celebrate birthdays, then that shows that he's following the rukhas. وغير ذلك من المقاصد السيئة. And also if a person, مثلا if a student wants to test his teacher, the teacher shouldn't answer his question. The teacher shouldn't answer his question, and you should tell him to leave. Like the man that said to Imam Malik, كيف استوى? صح? Imam Malik said, get out of the gathering. He told him to get out of the gathering. So if a teacher or the sheikh feels that this student is trying to test him or trying to expose him and so on and so forth, then he shouldn't answer him. And that is a disease that some students have. And those sorts of students, they never get the tawfiq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Some of them will memorize a mas'ala, a hadith and so on, and then all of a sudden ask the sheikh. And the sheikh probably hasn't looked at that hadith sanad for 10 years. And then the sheikh says, yeah, the hadith is authentic. And he goes, la, there's this person in the sanad, there's this person in the sanad. No, we said this about the sanad, and so on. And the sheikh says, you know. So he did it to embarrass the sheikh. Lakin, that will cause the student not to get the tawfiq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because knowledge is not about embarrassing your sheikh or your teacher and so on. Lakin, that is, the uquba can come back to that student. طيب. The third is أن لا يترتب على الفتوى ما هو أكثر منها ضررا فإن ترتب عليها ذلك وجب الإمساك عنها دفعا لأشد المفسدتين. Also, when asking the question, the fitna cannot be greater when answering the question. So if someone asks you a question, and by you giving the answer, there can be a greater fitna that comes about, then don't give the answer, even if you know the answer. For example, it is said that Abdillah ibn Abbas, a man came to him and he said, هل للقاتل توبة? The qatil, the one that kills, has he got tawbah? And he said, لا. And another man came to him and he said, هل للقاتل توبة? And he said, نعم. He said, yes. The one that kills, the murderer, has tawbah. The previous one, what did he say to him? لا. So Ibn Abbas' student said to him, why did you give a different answer? He goes, because the first one looked like he wanted a fatwa, he looked like a person that wanted to go and kill. The second one looked like a person who had a lot of regret, or he had regret on killing someone. Is there not a difference? No. The answer is, the first one, if you tell him, khalas, there's tawbah, he goes, khalas, I'll go kill him and I'll come with him back. Like in the second one, so if you give him that fatwa, he'll go and kill him. Like if you tell him, la, he doesn't have repentance, what's he going to do? More often than not, he's going to refrain from it. And the second one that came to you after killing someone with the face of regret, if you tell him, na'am, there is repentance, that will encourage him to what? To make tawbah. Like if you tell him, khalas, there's no repentance, he might actually kill you. Like the man did, the one that killed 99 men. The 100th Abid, he killed him when he said to him, there's no tawbah. So, and that, the masalih and the mafasid are in everything. In everything. The masalih and the mafasid. Take that as a qa'idah. In your day-to-day lives, always try to apply the masalih and the mafasid. When you're faced with anything in your life, look at the masalih and the mafasid. Why? Because in most cases, there's nothing that has a maslaha 100% and a mafsada 100%. More often than not, there's a maslaha in a certain thing and a mafsada. But it's down to you to what? To outweigh and balance between the two. طيب. Then the Shaykh says, rahimahullah, نعم. ما يلزم المستفتي. Now he's going to talk about that which is wajib upon the person that is asking the question. The one that is what? Asking the question. He says, يلزم المستفتي أمور. There are certain things that are wajib upon the mustafti. الأول أن يريد باستفتائه الحق والعمل به لا تتبع رخص وإفحام المفتي وغير ذلك من المقاصد السيئة. The very first thing that he must need or he must have is that he wants, or when asking this question, he wants the answer because he wishes to act upon the answer. من حيث العمل. He wants to actually act upon the answer. And he's not asking just so that he can get a rukhsa, a concession. Because sometimes what happens is a person sends five messages to 5 different shuyukh. He sends out 5 different messages. هل كذا وكذا حلال؟ هل هذا هل هو حلال أو حرام? The first sheikh says haram, لا هذا ما يعرف. The second one says haram, he goes no. He waits for the third, and when the third one says halal, khalas, takes it, and he doesn't even take the consideration that the remaining 2 shuyukh, or the remaining 2 answers, he doesn't take into consideration. That is following what? Desires. Sometimes what a person does is they ask you a question, and this often happens. A person will be asked, what is the ruling on having the wali if the wali doesn't pray? If the wali is not happy with a certain person, and a woman asking a sheikh or a person, what is the ruling on, مثلا, my father doesn't pray, or my father is a Sufi, can I get married, can someone else marry me off? Or my father is not happy with a certain person and he doesn't have a legitimate reason, can the guardianship be taken from him? When a person answers that, when you give them the answer, they never reply back. Like if you were to say yes, they would send you 150 messages back just to say Jazakallahu khairan. Just to say Jazakallahu khairan. Why? Because you gave them the fatwa that they wanted. Like when you say, la, it is not permissible, and you need to go to the mahkamah and the imam and so on, and everyone has to present their case, they don't want that answer. And these are things that people shouldn't play about with. This is your religion. Mathalan, if someone gets married like that, at the very least, that nikah is what? Nikah shubha. At the very least, there's a nikah that is a nikah that has doubts around it. Because it is not permissible for a woman to get married without the permission of her father or her wali, her guardian. So if he doesn't know, then khalas, you can't get married. As for if he doesn't have a legitimate reason, then khalas, you present it in front of the qadi and that's it. Sometimes what happens is a person will come to a sheikh and he will say, listen, I divorced my wife 3 times. But I remembered the first time I didn't have permission from her father to marry her. That means I've only married her twice, innit? Seriously. That question I've come across that question. A person saying, I've divorced my wife 3 times. Is it permissible for him to marry her again? Like, unless she gets married to what? Someone else. So in order to nullify one of the talaqat, in order to nullify, he says, the very first time when I was getting married to her, it was without the permission of her father. So Shaykh, that nikah doesn't really count, does it? So the other 2 count, but that doesn't count. If you say to him, na'am, it doesn't count, what is the difference? You've now given him the last line. You've given him the last talqa. He can get married to her again, sah? Because he's only divorced her how many times? 2. So a person, when asking a question, ask, as the Shaykh is going to mention, ask a person who you know will answer the question, someone whose knowledge you trust, khalas, and act upon that. طيب. The second is, أن لا يستفتي إلا من يعلم أو يغلب على ظنه أنه أهل للفتوى. And it is not permissible for him, he should not ask except for someone that knows, or someone that he believes knows the answer. As long as he's a person that is worthy of asking, who ahlul lil fatwa, he's a person that can give an answer, he's a sheikh or a student of knowledge and so on, and you know he can give an answer. And this goes against the common practices of many people. Why? Because a lot of them, they walk into the masjid and they see someone praying, or he's got a big beard, and they ask him, what is the ruling on this? They may come across someone on public transport with a big beard or a thobe, and they ask him, Ma hukm kada wa kada, what is the ruling on this and this? And they act upon whatever he tells them. Whereas if they wanted to buy a new house, or whether they had a problem with their health, they would go to the best consultants. They would go to a private doctor or a private hospital. They wouldn't go to anyone on the train and say, listen, I've got kidney stones, what's the best way to cure this? طيب. Then the Shaykh says, وَيَنْبَغِي أَنْ يَخْتَارَ أَوْثَقَ الْمُفْتِينَ عِلْمًا وَرَعًا وَقِيلَ يَجِبُ ذَلِكَ. The Shaykh says, rahimahullah, it is wajib to choose the one who he has the most confidence in when it comes to asking, in terms of knowledge and in terms of piety. He can choose. So if there are two shaykhs and they're both knowledgeable and they're both pious, the shaykh says you can choose who you ask. وَقِيلَ يَجِبُ, and it is said that it is wajib for him to ask the one that is more knowledgeable. وَقِيلَ, that is what he means when he says وَقِيلَ, it is wajib to ask the one that is more knowledgeable. Like, questions after, yeah? Naam. So based on that, if there are two shaykhs and they're both knowledgeable, you can ask whichever one. Lakin on the where he says وَقِيلَ يَجِبُ, then you can ask, he's saying you can ask the person that has the most knowledge, or the fadil, the one that is more virtuous. So the shaykh says lakin وَقِيلَ, and if he says وَقِيلَ, what does that show? It's marjuh, yani. Why? Because during the time of the Sahaba, during the time of Abu Bakr and Umar radiallahu anhuma, the other companions used to give fatawa. They used to answer questions. When Umar and Abu Bakr radiallahu anhuma were present. طيب الثالث أن يصف حاله وصفا صادقا دقيقا. He has to, when the person is asking the question, he has to answer, or he has to explain the question in detail. The question in detail. Like the Sa'il said to the Prophet ﷺ, إِنَّا نَرْكَبُ الْبَحْرَ وَنَحْمِلُ مَعَنَا الْقَلِيلَ مِنَ الْمَاءِ. So when the Prophet was being asked, a man said to him, Ya Rasulullah, verily we travel by sea and we carry a little bit of water with us, and if we make wudu with that water, then we will be thirsty. Should we make wudu with the water of the sea? Look, he clarified. He goes, we travel, we carry water, but that water is not enough. Can we make water with what? With the water of the sea. The Prophet ﷺ answered, هو الطهور ماؤه الحل ميتته. So it is permissible to make wudu with the water of the what? Of the sea. And also, although it is important to explain the question in detail, lakin as a person asking the question, only ask and mention those things that have a say in the hukum, those things that actually matter. Is that understood? So for example, مثلا a person says two people have a dispute over a phone, or a person says to you, what is the ruling on buying a phone from such and such? And he says to you, this morning my father passed away and I inherited X amount of money from him. Alhamdulillah, that money has now been put into my account, and I went to the cash machine and I withdrew that money after Dhuhr, and then after Asr I came across a shop that was selling nice items, but one of the items is this. Can I buy this item? Is there anything wrong with this question? Everything is wrong with it. What is wrong with it? He could have just said the ending. Is it permissible to buy this item? We don't care about your father. Like, we do care about your father passed away. Like, the fact that your father passed away has no say in the matter. The fact that the money was put into your account has no say in the matter, in that fatwa. The fact that you withdrew that money at 12 p.m. has nothing to do with us. The fact that you walked by a shop has nothing to do with us. You can walk by a caravan for all we care. Like, what matters is the mas'ala that you asked about. Is that understood? طيب, مثلا, the willy issue earlier on. So, sometimes a question may come to you and it may be said that, listen, Shaykh, from a very young age, my father had no contact with the family. We don't know if he's alive or if he's well, and he's always had mental issues, and he's always been this, and he's always been that, and he's always been that, and I haven't seen him for the last 50 years. or last 20 years or so, not 50. Last 20 years. And what is the ruling on him being the wali, or him getting his permission? I know the person is explaining the situation and the scenario, but does anything that was mentioned have anything to do with the actual hukum? Put the mentality to one side. I know it's the mentality. Put that to one side. Like in everything else, it has no saying. Whether he's had nothing to do with the family or not. Whether he lives abroad or not. Whether he's a bad person or not. That doesn't have anything to do with the actual hukum. Is understood? The actual hukum, or the question should be, what is the ruling on the walaya of the father? When can it be taken from him? If he's not a person that is interested in the family, for example, or he's not interested in the best interest, out for the best interest of his daughter. That sort of question can be shortened. As for what happened previously, the mufti, the person that's given the fatwa, can't base anything upon that. Is that understood? طيب. And الرابع أن يتنبه لما يقوله المفتي بحيث لا ينصرف منه إلا وقد فهم الجواب تماما. That he should pay attention to what the mufti has said. So when you ask someone, pay attention to what the person has said to you and the answer. And do not turn away from the mufti unless or until you understand everything that they said, that the mufti said completely. And it is said that Shaykh ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah, when he would give a fatwa, he would say to the person, have you understood? He would say, yeah. He would say, repeat it to me. Repeat what I've just said. And that is very important, because sometimes what happens is, the mufti will say, or the person will be asked the question, he will say, "La, this is permissible based on this condition and this condition and this condition." Sah? So Zayd says to you, "Ya Shaykh, what is the hukum on that?" And you say, "Ya Zayd, hada jaiz bi shardi kada wa kada wa kada." It's permissible on this condition, this condition, this condition. And Shaykh Zayd says, "Jazakallahu khairan." Muhammad comes to Zayd and says, what did the Shaykh say? He goes, Shaykh said jaiz. Is that correct? No. The Shaykh said jaiz is true, permissible, lacking with what? With conditions. So make sure that the person understands the conditions. Also, when the person is asking the question, you have to understand that this person might not know the mustalahat al-shari'ah, terminologies of the sharia. You can't say to him, because this hadith is mantuq and this one's mafhum, then I'm going to give you the answer of mantuq because you give precedence to the mantuq, and that's what we learn in Usul al-Fiqh. Don't know what you're talking about. Ya Shaykh, halal am haram? Halal am haram, they will say. Also, when you're given a khutbah, if you go into, you're talking about hadith, and you're talking about the takhrij of the hadith, صححه الألباني في كذا وقال عنه كذا للمديني كذا ويحيى معين قال كذا عنه إمام أحمد صححه في كذا. These awam, they have no idea what you're talking about. If you just say the hadith is sahih, is that understood? It makes it a lot easier. Right. So these are the 4 conditions that the Shaykh rahimahullah mentioned for the person asking the question. And on that note, we finish Al-Mufti wal-Mustafti. What is the hukum on a person calling himself a Mufti? Or himself a Mufti? Mufti Sa'id. Mufti Abdillah. لا تزكوا أنفسكم. It's not befitting that a person says that my name is Mufti this and Mufti that. That's literally you saying I'm a alim, I'm a sheikh, That's praising yourself, and we shouldn't praise ourselves. And you won't find any of the imams in the past saying, Ismi Imam Ahmed, or Ismi Imam Al-Shafi'i. حتى the laqab, مثلا, can you imagine Ibn Taymiyyah saying Shaykh al-Islam bin kada wa kada, or Al-Allama, it's not permissible. So it's not correct for a person to say Ismi Mufti kada. As for what people label you, that's khalas. As for if you are the Mufti of the country, then khalas, then there's no harm in that as well. If you genuinely are the Mufti. So we're not going to say to Shaykh Abdul Aziz al-Shaykh Hafidahullah, why have you called yourself a Mufti? La, he is the Mufti. Also, the Mufti is a noble position. It is a noble position. So a person should not praise himself in calling himself a mufti, and it's so common nowadays. طيب الاجتهاد هو or the تعريف of it الاجتهاد بذل الجهد لإدراك أمر شاق. The Shaykh rahimahullah is now going to go into one of the masail that is talked about in Usul al-Fiqh. The first, he says al-ijtihad. Al-ijtihad, the definition is lughatan, linguistically, بذل الجهد, to exert oneself لإدراك أمر شاق, exerting oneself in order to achieve or to attain or to complete something which is difficult. So you would say اجتهدت في حمل المتاع. I done ijtihad in removing the stuff. Like you wouldn't say اجتهدت في رفع الورقة. I done ijtihad in lifting the letter, the paper. Why? Because paper doesn't require what? يعني مشقة. There's no difficulty surrounding it. So it is only used for something which requires juhdi and which requires effort. Then the Shaykh says, واصطلاحا, as for اصطلاحا, it is بذل الجهد, same as before, لإدراك, same as before. It is to exert oneself in knowing and understanding حكم شرعي. It is to exert oneself in understanding a حكم شرعي, a religious legislative ruling. Add on there amali, because that is what? That limits it to al-ahkam al-amaliyya, salah, zakah, hajj, and so on and so forth. What does that exclude? Amali, what does it exclude? I'tiqad. يعني you won't say اجتهدت في معرفة حكم رؤية الله سبحانه وتعالى, في حكم رؤية الله سبحانه وتعالى يوم القيامة. I done ijtihad in knowing the hukm of knowing or seeing the believers seeing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala yawm al-qiyamah. You can do ijtihad in the sense that you look at all of the evidences and you combine them and you put them together and so on. Like when we're talking about usul al-fiqh, that is not what is being referred to when they mention al-juhd, when they mention al-ijtihad. طيب, so that is ijtihad. So what is the mujtahid? The mujtahid is the one that is carrying out this operation. So the mujtahid is what? Write it down. من بذل جهده في إدراك ومن بذل جهده لإدراك حكم شرعي عملي. من بذل جهده لإدراك حكم شرعي عملي. He is the one that actually exerts himself to know and to understand and to comprehend a legislative ruling. طيب. المجتهد نوعان. The mujtahid is of two. مجتهد مطلق ومجتهد جزئي. Mujtahid mutlaq is the unrestricted mujtahid. And he is الذي بلغ. The mujtahid al-mutlaq is الذي بلغ رتبة الاجتهاد بحيث يمكنه النظر في جميع مسائل الدين. في جميع مسائل الدين. So the mujtahid al-mutlaq is the one that can look at all of the masail of the religion, all the ahkam of hajj, all of the ahkam of salah, siyam, zakah, talaq, nikah, all of the abwab that you've studied. He's a mujtahid mutlaq. مثلا إمام أحمد, إمام شافعي, إمام أبو حنيفة, إمام مالك, شيخ الإسلام ابن تيمية. Imam Nawawi, Ibn Qudama, these sorts of Imams, Mujtahid Mutlaq. Then you have Al-Mujtahid Al-Juz'i. And he is الذي بلغ رتبة الاجتهاد في باب معين أو في مسائل معينة. So the Mujtahid al-Juz'i, he is the one that has ijtihad on certain masail. For example, fara'id, he's excellent at fara'id. He can do ijtihad in fara'id. Any mas'ala you give him, he'll solve it like that. That is his takhassus and his specialty. Like in other masail in the deen, he won't be able to answer it. So that Mujtahid al-Juz is of different types. For example, sometimes he has specialty in one mas'ala. For example, his PhD is on one specific mas'ala. Mathalan, shares. Is there zakat on shares? Or he does a PhD in Bitcoin or cryptocurrency and so on. That is his ijtihad. طيب. Or also, he is a mujtahid fil madhab. He is a mujtahid in one madhab. Madhab of the Hanafiya, the Malikiyya, the Shafi'iyya and the Hanabila. He's a mujtahid fil madhab. So that mujtahid is juz'i. طيب. Then the Shaykh says, rahimahullah, in the last mas'ala, shurut al-ijtihad. Shurut al-ijtihad. Now he's going to mention some masail. طيب. He's going to mention the conditions for a person to be a mujtahid. شروط المجتهد. نعم. أو شروط الاجتهاد. للاجتهاد شروط منها. So there are conditions that the mujtahid has to fulfill. And if he doesn't fulfill these conditions, then he cannot give ijtihad. Don't look at the book. Look towards the front. What sort of conditions would you place on a mujtahid? I want brothers to give me two, and sisters to give me two. Without looking at the books. Brothers. Well, let's start with the sisters. What two conditions should we place on the mujtahid? He has to be tall and knowledgeable and just. Okay? Jade. Knowledgeable and just. Okay? Well, Ikhwani? He has to have memorized the ayat al-ahkam. He has to memorize those verses, ayat al-ahkam. طيب?
He needs to know the differences of opinions from the Sahaba or the.
He has to know in every single mas'ala?
Yeah.
Okay. Every single mas'ala. Right.
Overwhelming knowledge of that specific thing.
Overwhelming knowledge in that specific subject.
He has to have usul fiqh and Arabic.
No, he has to have usul fiqh and the Arabic language. طيب, let's look at what the Shaykh says رحمه الله. أن يعلم من الأدلة الشرعية ما يحتاج إليه في اجتهاده كآيات الأحكام وأحاديثها. So he has to know the knowledge of, or he has to have knowledge of what he needs when it comes to ayat al-ahkam. So the scholars, they divide the Quran into ayat al-ahkam and the ayat that don't have ahkam. And they say the ayat al-ahkam, some say they are 500, some say they are 600. And some of the scholars have authored books or tafasir in that. Tafsir al-Qurtubi, Jami' al-Ahkam al-Quran, Ahkam al-Quran, Al-Jassas, one of the scholars of the Hanafiya. So there are those scholars that deal with the ahkam that are found in the ayat of the Sunnah of the Quran. Then in the Quran, in the Sunnah, there's ahadith al-ahkam. There are ahadith that deal with ahkam. For example, books like Umdat al-Ahkam, Bulugh al-Maram. صح؟ مثلا المنتقى by Majd ibn Taymiyyah, the grandfather of Ibn Taymiyyah. And he was an alim in the madhab of the Hanabila. And who explained that book? Ash-Shawkani, in a book called Nail al-Awtar, about 16 volumes. So that is the books that deal with ahadith al-ahkam. So the Shaykh is saying that mujtahid, he has to know at the very least ayat al-ahkam and ayat the ahadith. Why? Because what he's giving a fatwa in is in the ahkam. Some say he has to memorize them, and some say he has to be able to have access to the ayat and know where they are and so on. طيب. And some say, la, he has to be a hafidh of the kitab of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in totality for him to be a mujtahid. Then the Shaykh says, rahimahullah, the second condition, أن يعرف ما يتعلق بصحة الحديث وضعفه كمعرفة الإسناد والرجال وغير ذلك. The second condition is that he must know that which pertains to the authenticity of a hadith and the weakness of a hadith, and knowing the men in the chain, the narrators in the chain of narration, and other than that, meaning the conditions of a hadith that is sahih. What are the conditions for the hadith that is sahih, and what are the conditions of the hadith that is Hassan, and jam'u turuq, and shahid, what is a shahid, what is a mutabi', and what is jarh wa ta'dil, and so on. Like with regards to that, with ilm al-hadith, a mujtahid can be a muqallid in ilm al-hadith. So even if he doesn't know this, obviously he has to know what the basics are. Like hadith that is sahih, he has to know the conditions. Hadith that is da'if, why is it da'if? What does it mean to be da'if? What are some of the illas that can be found? He has to know that. Like as for in detail, then he can do taqleed of another alim. He can do taqleed of another alim in his ahkam of the ahadith, or placing rulings or the gradings of another sheikh. Is that understood? طيب. Number 3, أن يعرف الناسخ من المنسوخ. He has to know the nasikh and mansukh. Otherwise, he's going to give a fatwa on something that is mansukh, صح? Something that the hukum has been abrogated and it's not even been implemented. So he has to know the difference between the nasikh and the mansukh. ومواقع الإجماع. And he has to know where there's ijma' and where there isn't ijma'. Where there isn't ijma'. حتى مواقع الإجماع حتى لا يحكم بمنسوخ أو مخالف للإجماع. Why does he need to know this? Because if he doesn't know the nasikh from the mansukh, he's going to give his hukum based, he might possibly give it based on something that is mansukh. Why does he need to know where there's ijma' and where there isn't ijma'? Because it may be that he contradicts an ijma'. And is it permissible to contradict an ijma'? La, it's haram. Like if he doesn't even know there's ijma', he'll give a fatwa and you do mukhalafah of that ijma'. Not intentionally, but because he doesn't know. Questions after you. طيب. Also, the Shaykh says, rahimahullah, number 4, أن يعرف من الأدلة ما يختلف به الحكم. He has to know from the evidences what changes the hukum من تخصيص أو تقييد أو نحوه حتى لا يحكم بما يخالف ذلك. Basically, he has to know the difference between am and what? Khas. Mutlaq and muqayyad. Amr and nahi. So he has to know these things in order to what? To arrive at the correct hukum. Lakin if he doesn't know the difference between am and khas, then he's going to implement the am when in reality there's a hadith that is khas or the dalil that is khas, which nullifies the acting upon that hadith. That is what? That is am. Or the verse that is am. Then the Shaykh says, rahimahullah, يعرف من اللغة, he has to know the Arabic language, وأصول الفقه, and أصول الفقه ما يتعلق بدلالات الألفاظ. دلالات الألفاظ. What we just mentioned, am, khas, he has to know what these actually are. What is am, what is khas. Not how to use them, like what are they? كالعام والخاص والمطلق والمقيد والمجمل والمبين ونحو ذلك ليحكم بما تقتضيه تلك الدلالات. Why? So he can give a hukum based on what these dalalat show. Number 6, أن يكون عنده قدرة يتمكن بها من استنباط الأحكام من أدلتها. Number 6, he has to be able to have the ability to derive rulings. Sometimes a person is a hafidh and a person knows the Arabic language and he knows Usul al-Fiqh. Like in terms of deriving the ahkam, he doesn't know that. He's not faqih. Why? Because being able to derive rulings, that is a hiba min Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is a blessing and a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why some of the ulama, you give him a hadith and he will derive 80 rulings from a hadith. Another individual, you may give him a hadith, he might derive 20 max. بالكاد يعني, he might barely makes it to 20. Although it's the same hadith. لكن that is where people differ, that we mujtahidun differ, and tafaqquh fi din differs. طيب. So these are, how many? 6. Add on to this, number 7, معرفة مقاصد الشريعة. معرفة مقاصد الشريعة. He has to know the maqasid, the objectives of the sharia. Why? Because understanding the objectives of the sharia, the maqasid al-sharia, it helps you derive the correct rulings, because you will know why certain things have been legislated. You will know why this has been legislated, and that has been legislated, and this has been made haram, and so on and so forth. So you may not know evidence pertaining to a certain mas'ala, but you know the general principles of the sharia. Therefore, you give a ruling based on the general principles of the sharia. طيب, so that is number 7. طيب. Also the mujtahid, and write this down, أن يكون المجتهد عارفا بالواقعة. أن يكون المجتهد عارفا بالواقع, let's say بالواقع, ومدركا لأحوال النازلة. He has to know, the mujtahid has to know the ins and the outs of this particular mas'ala. That's why earlier on the Shaykh says, الحكم على شيء فرع أن تصوره. You can't give a hukum to something unless you know it. So if a alim doesn't know the hukum or the hal or the situation of a certain mas'ala, then he shouldn't give a fatwa. مثلا, if a person lives in one part of the world and another alim lives in another part of the world, the person in that land should ask the alim from their country. Or the alim that he's asking, whether he's from his country or that country, wherever, he must know the ins and outs of the mas'ala. Like, if a person is in the other side of the world and he doesn't even know the waqi', then he might not be able to give an answer. And also, to not transfer that fatwa that has been given in a certain land and try applying it elsewhere where the ulama might give a different ruling. Mathalan, during Corona, there was a great fitna over salah, sah? When people would say that the two people, that the musallin, there has to be a meter gap between them. And there was a great fitna, sah? Should there be a great fitna? No, there shouldn't be a great fitna. The salah is, mathalan al-an, what is the hukum, if I ask you, what is the hukum on taswiyat al-sufuf, feet to feet, shoulder to shoulder? Even if we say it is wajib, هل تبطل الصلاة بها? Does the salah become nullified? لا, it doesn't become nullified. So something that the salah doesn't become nullified, and looking at other maqasid of the sharia, then if a alim gives a fatwa and says that it is permissible to pray like that, khalas, it shouldn't be the end of the world. And it should not be a reason why a person misses the jama'ah. During the time of the Quran, you would find people saying, I'm not going to the masjid because they are praying like that. That is ghayatun fil jahli. That is ignorance. Why? Because at the very most, let's say that is not permissible. The fact that it's impermissible doesn't harm your what? Your salah. It doesn't render your salah void. It is not like they are saying, pray with no wudu. It is not like they are saying, pray facing the other direction, not the qibla but the other direction. It is not something that nullifies wudu. So these sorts of things, they shouldn't be a means of khilaf. And even if they are a means of khilaf, what I mean by that is they shouldn't be a means for hatred and enmity and hostility between mashayikh and students of knowledge. Why? Because these masail is accepting of al-akhd wa rad. Ad-dalil wa dalil. Is that understood? And if that is not understood, if a alim or if a student of knowledge doesn't apply this, then it is problemsome. Because they may hear a fatwa by a certain sheikh and say that you have to implement that fatwa. When in reality, the scenario that the sheikh gave that fatwa in is not the scenario. The sheikh may have said, based on this condition and this condition and this condition. Rather, some of the mashayikh, I've heard them say that a person shouldn't give an answer or give a fatwa in a certain place that is am. You know, sometimes they have TV shows where you, fatwa. Somebody saying that shouldn't even be done, or even across the radio. Why? Because when an alim gives a fatwa to someone, he says that it is permissible based on X, Y, Z. Fulan from down the road that is listening, he might think, Wallahi Shaykh gal halal. Khalas, he said halal. Not paying attention to the quyud and the restrictions and the conditions. Now, so that is with regards to al-ijtihad. Inshallah, next week we'll finish off al-ijtihad and go into taqleed, and then that is the final lesson, inshallah, bi'idhnillah, of Usul al-Fiqh. And then after that we'll have the test. So you might as well start revising from now on. There's a mas'ala I want you to do bahthi of as homework. And inshallah at the beginning of next class we'll have niqash over it. And the mas'ala is هل كل مجتهد مصيب هل كل مجتهد مصيب, and it means, is every single mujtahid musib? Is he correct? Is every single mujtahid correct? Go on, we've got a bit of time for questions.
For condition 3, why was it that the ijma and the abrogation was put together as one condition rather than two separate ones? Or is that just...
No, there's no specific reason why it would be ijma. It just for shortening the conditions. Because in reality you can say, you can split all of those conditions until they reach about 20.
The person does so, whatever the intention of following what he views, who he views to have a stronger opinion, would that still fall within the something that more? So you ask a question, and then you will get a response from the Mashayikh about looking at which one you feel is correct.
Yeah, that's different. When a person is asking questions and he asks two different sheikhs, for example, and then they give him a fatwa, and then he looks at whichever is the strongest opinion, it can't exactly be said that he is tatabu' of the rukhas or he's following concessions. Lakin, if the person has the ability to differentiate between the weaker opinion and the stronger opinion, or that which is al-qarab, he should do bahthi himself.
What is that character that can't do that? He needs some receiving in that. That's what you're going to like.
Doing two Jum'ah in one masjid.
So obviously, looking into the German however, the person or the sheikh I came across who gave us to see was Sheikh al-Waqi, because the questioner gave me the best picture I felt. He said to him, my friends, XYZ. And exactly. And then the sheikh said it's permissible. And he gave the suite as to what you can and can't do. Can't say so if I take that call, even less than I use it all on my chemical said that everyone else said.
La, then it's permissible for you to take that opinion. La, it is what the reality is. It coincides with the reality. It's in accordance with the reality. La, it's not magjuh.
In terms of when you look at everyone else, they will say.
La, magjuh is not what? From the murajjihat, did we say al-akthar? The majority of scholars? La. The jumhur, did we say is the stronger opinion? La. Marjuh, the number is not from the murajjihat. Lakin, that scenario that you mentioned, that goes back to the masala that I was saying, that the fatwa, qad takhtalif, it could change from place to place. مثلا الآن you're in Mecca, and then you're in مثلا a masjid. and there are tons of masajid, and the masjid that you're in has about, can fit 1,000 musallin, only about 500 pray in there. And then you say after the khutbah we're praying second Jum'ah. Is there a need? La, there is no need. Like in مثلا you're in the west and you're in a very busy area, and in one of the hospitals you have a big musalla. But even a masjid, مثلا you have a masjid there مثلا in central London or anywhere in London, for example. And the masjid in the UK, it's only so big. Even masajid are usually what? Small. So you can only fit a certain number of musallin for every one go, in every Jum'ah. So if you say I'm only going to have one Jama'ah, khalas, find a place for all of the other individuals that don't have a place to pray. So in that case, it might even be wajib to follow that second fatwa. Might even be wajib to follow that second fatwa. Why? Because people are not going to get anywhere to pray. Where do you expect them to go? Pray dhuhr in their office? When there's a possibility of praying Jum'ah in the same location? So that is not following the rukhas or concession. That is just following what is the waqi' of the place that you're in. Like you can say it's marjuh because marjuh aslan comes from ijtihadi things. La, adad is not a murajjihat. Although Shaykh al-Islam rahimahullah mentions that in almost every single mas'ala, the jumhur are not on an opinion, except that is the stronger opinion. However, there's not the jumhur here. It's like 3 scholars on one side and 1 on the other side. There's no number.
I know the reason why I said it was because I remember they mentioned that after even of itself, that you have one Jum'ah per town. There's no from.
Sahih, it's true.
So he said, then how are we now going to like even go even further by saying the woman should have 2? If it's
Sahih. The asl is that you have one Jum'ah. The asl is that you have one Salatul Eid. But when the community, Muslim community, mashallah, is large, you can't fit them all in one masjid. Hence you have so many different masajid. So if that haja has been made permissible due to the number of Muslims, then why can 2 Jum'ahs not be made permissible due to the same haja? Al-hukmu yaduru ma'al illati wujudan wa adama. Any questions, sisters? Any questions? خلاص والله. Come.
What would you advise if there's 2 big shuyukh, but one is less knowledgeable in the ulum of deen, like the sciences of the religion, than the other, but he has a better understanding of this specific matter over this shuyukh?
خلاص, it's permissible to ask him.
That the one with the less science.
مثلا that it's permissible to ask him, and it's permissible to take his fatwa. The brother Mubarak just mentioned a fatwa that was asked Sheikh Abdul Muhsin al-Abbad hafidhahullah. Sheikh Abdul Muhsin al-Abbad and Sheikh Fawzan, 2 imams. طيب. And Sheikh Sulaiman al-Rahil hafidhahullah answered the question as well, the same sort of question. Now obviously Sheikh Fawzan hafidhahullah and Sheikh Abdul Muhsin al-Abbad hafidhahullah, they are on the level of the shuyukh of, they are the shuyukh of Sheikh Sulaiman al-Rahil hafidhahullah. Like in that fatwa that the brother mentioned about Sheikh Sulaiman saying that you can pray 2 Jum'ahs in a masjid if there's a need, we as Muslims living in the West can't apply any other fatwa except for that.
When we were going through if you have 2 of the sheikhs and equal in piety and knowledge, and we said we can go for the one that's more knowledgeable. If it's equal in their knowledge, can we then say the one that is older maybe to prefer that person over, or
You can prefer them over. You can prefer the fadil, you can prefer the mafdul, you can ask whichever one, as long as they're both knowledgeable and they both have understanding of the Sharia.
You mentioned the conditions of the Muslim. He has to know the hal of the people that he's from. So you say that the people of the band that they go to the shaykh in their land, because what happens is that kind of linked to what Barak was saying, that sometimes fatawa comes from certain bilad and they don't understand the tasawwur of the bilad. Maybe they haven't traveled or these kind of things. So would you say that it's better to look at the fatawa that people from your country, or they have takhasus in the land because they understand it more?
To give it like that, you can't really answer it with a general fatwa like that, or a general answer like that, because then to say, if you say that you can only ask the people living in that land, then that in certain masail, na'am, it can be. In certain masail, you might be able to ask those people that, for example, now even mashayikh that travel to the West often, they may have a better understanding of the hal of the West than those mashayikh that don't travel to the West. So in that case, na'am. And in general, every shaykh, the community that he's in, he understands them more, the waqi', the tradition, everything. Like for example, if you've got a certain person from a certain method and a community, even the communities, even within our Muslim ummah, the communities, if you've got a certain shaykh that is from a certain community, will he not understand that community more than another shaykh from another method and a different culture? He will understand it. That's the waqi', we can't deny that. However, if the questioner explains the question in detail to the extent that the mufti or the sheikh understands the question in totality, then it might be the same. Like more often than not, it won't be the same. The person that is with that community or that lives among them and so on and so forth will have a different understanding. And that should, however, having said that, there are people that take advantage of that want to disconnect the Muslim ummah in the West from the ulama that live in Muslim countries. And then you get people like Yasir Qadi being called a scholar who becomes a marji' in the UK, or people like Haytham Haddad who becomes a marji' or a reference point for the people in the UK. And they shouldn't be used as a marji'. People like those individuals that I just mentioned, people like and other people in general on that caliber, they shouldn't be used as maraji' or as a marji', because the fatawa they give are in clear contradiction to the Quran and the Sunnah. So that's for that reason that they can't be, even though they live in the West. So we're going to say, I'm going to take knowledge from these two, but I'm not going to ask Fawzan because Fawzan ma yafqah al-waqi', or I'm not going to ask Shaykh Sulaiman Ruhail li'annahu la yafqah al-waqi', he doesn't live between us in the UK. No. So there are those that go overboard. And there are those that say, listen, these people that you're referring to, they don't even understand your situation. They don't understand the hal of your situation or the waqi' of your situation. So it's true, they don't live among us. Lakin the hukum shar'i of a mas'ala requires what? Knowledge. If they've got knowledge, khalas. You explain the hal to them and inshallah they'll give you a fatwa on it. So you can't give it one answer for that. Quickly, go on. Adam.
If you don't know an answer to the question, it's permissible to tell you to stay away from this issue while you ask to find out what you know your answer about, because it's ambiguous.
Yeah, no. If a person asks you a question and you don't know the answer to it, you tell them, listen, I don't know at the moment, but stay away from it for now. نعم. دع ما يريبك إلى ما لا يريبك. Last question.
You know the conditions of a mushtahid. He said he must know the ijma' the previous scholars, so he doesn't try to abrogate a previous one. But if you're in the opinion that there's only ijma' when it comes to the Salaf times, and after that, like we had the discussion in previous lessons.
هل وقع هذا? Has that happened? خلاص تبي say الله أعلم. From any perspective. الله أعلم. Maybe if you ask me at the beginning of next lesson. طيب والله تعالى أعلم.
وقل رب زدني